on this computer. We're going to share the screen. And this is for the study guide that's coming out on Saturday. All right. So first of all, we went through, and I hope, as I was starting this lecture to explain to you, that you'll see the importance of primaries if you want to make a decision as to which direction our country goes. Donald J. Trump won the nomination, starts out with like 20-30% of just the Republicans who went to the conventions, who went to the bother of showing up during the primaries. Look, had Bush been able to generate 30-40%, he's president right now. And my guess is he's still president right now. This guy ran a brilliant campaign. It was one of the truly remarkable campaigns in American history, ranks right up there with some of the most critical, well, one of the most critical of all time. But the importance of it is he did it on a shoestring, and he did it differently than anybody else. It was a media event, all of his rallies. And then he called into Fox News, where people over 50 that are Republicans, voters likely to vote in primaries, go get their news at this time period. He called in every day. This is free media. He didn't have to pay for it. He didn't have to buy time to show ads and whatever on Fox News. He just called in every day. Why weren't the other candidates doing that? They would have taken their calls. Marco Rubio, yeah, let's listen, let's interview Marco, whatever. Didn't do it. He dominated the #1 media source for the voters who were likely to show up to vote for him for the nomination for a Republican Party, the RNC, Republican National Committee. All right, now here's the thing, right? This right here, he had a small staff. No one's ever won the presidency with this small staff in modern times. And nobody's done it using social media. Now, he gets the nomination, and then some pretty interesting things happen. He turns his abilities, I guess you'd call him that, toward Hillary Clinton. Now, he wanted to run against Hillary Clinton because basically Republicans have spent the last 24 years trashing her reputation and driving it pretty much into Zeroville. As First Lady, they knew she was a threat to be president. They knew when she ran for the Senate in New York and won it twice and became Secretary of State that she was a real threat. So they did everything they could to try to make sure she didn't become the first woman president. That's their job. That's the job of an opposition party. But she didn't handle it very well. And then when this attack came, it came out of the blue. Basically, I'm being said that I am a criminal because I read email. A Secretary of State, she had a lot of her emails forwarded to her home computer, which was a foundation computer that her husband had set up. So some IT person set this up for her. She had no idea where the emails were. By the way, all the emails were all on the State Department server, because there's always two, there's always two. It's never, when you send it, there's an original and then so on. She didn't think she was breaking any rules, and it wasn't a law. It was just a guideline within the State Department that you should kind of, go through the secure system, the VPN, and do that. I'm sure she doesn't know what VPN even means. But by the same token, Trump was able to make this sound like one of the biggest national security breaches and a felony, and she should go to jail. And and when he gets to be president, they're going to investigate this and lock her up was the chant in all of his rallies. She didn't take this seriously, and she should have. Especially after candidate Trump was on a hot mic, meaning they left the mic on while the video, they're getting ready to film something, and nobody bothered to turn the audio off as he's having a casual conversation with this guy here on this bus at the Access Hollywood. Now, this happened years before, but he said some things in that are so vile that you can't even get close to what he said in class. I'm not even going to go there. But it was bad enough that everybody figured, well, this is the end of his campaign. That's over. Except that very same night, we get a whole bunch of emails that had been stolen from the Democratic National Committee, from their campaign, by foreign actors that get dumped to this English guy who's really Julian Assange, who's the head of a thing called WikiLeaks. And all of a sudden, this story became a one-day story, and that went right back to her emails as emails from her campaign were leaked to the public. Some of them have been altered. By who? We don't know. But suddenly she's on defense saying, he said this, she said this, my campaign manager, whatever. Anyway, it became a big deal. The FBI then was asked to investigate. They went through all of her emails and said, did she really, endanger national security? They came back with a report midsummer, says, no problem. She should have been more careful, obviously. But again, she's an older woman who knows not IT. But here's what happened next. The FBI got information, legitimate information, that her secretary or assistant had also downloaded emails to her personal computer, taken them home at night so she could go through Hillary's emails for her and print out the ones that she thought were important. So she could give them to Hillary in the morning and they could read them, in the limousine as they're going to their next event. That's being a good assistant. But they hadn't seen these emails yet. So the FBI said 9 days before the election, they say, crap, we got another 30,000 to go through. And suddenly it looked like the scandal was all over again. And it played right into the Trump narrative. See, I told you she's corrupt. We investigate. She's going to go to jail for this. Well, she's never going to go to jail for this. It was a very minor thing, but didn't really matter. It worked. And in that 9-day period, her polls plummeted. Trump's went up and he won the election. Had the election been held a week or two later, he wouldn't win. Had it been held a week before, he wouldn't win. It was that window, this story, the FBI director coming out. By the way, they went through those 3,000 emails in 3 days and found nothing that wasn't a duplicate of what they already had. So 3 days later, but it was too late, damage done, and she loses big time. Also, President Trump did have foreign help in his campaign. Now, we'll always be debating whether he solicited that or not, but we know members of his campaign actually were communicating with foreign nationals during the campaign. A lot of people said, no, fake news, hoax, didn't happen. But guess what? One of the most prominent FBI directors of all time, Robert Mueller, 10 years FBI director, was brought in out of retirement to head a commission, a group of investigators, to find out if Russia really had manipulated our democratic elections to its own autocratic purposes. What you should know about Putin is he loathed Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, badgered him on everything. Oh boy, he wanted to get even if she won the election, which I'm sure he thought she was going to do. He had damaged her politically. And that was kind of the thing. They had an entire unit of the GRU, that's the equivalent of their CIA, run out of their military. Thousands of people creating social media, creating fake websites, 5,000 Twitter feeds. They actually, one group was so expert, they managed to pretend to be Americans and organized a rally here in the United States from Europe that people came out and showed up to. Their idea was to sow disinformation about the campaign. I don't think they really cared who won, but to get Americans hating each other. If you're an autocrat, you don't like democracies and you want to show them up. He's done this in Germany. He's done this in Mexico. He's done this against other countries too. And Robert Mueller found 26 leaders of the Russian GRU, that's their secret service, and charged them with criminal acts against the United States. If they find themselves in a country that has extradition treaty with us, they will be arrested, brought to the United States, and stand trial for their crimes. 26 of them. 5 members of the Trump campaign, actually it's now 7, believe it or not, went to jail for this. And Mueller had an entire chapter talking about how the White House had obstructed the investigation to keep them from getting all the information they needed. Eventually, these 5 members of the Trump campaign actually did go to jail. This lawyer went to jail for 3.5 years. He was Trump's closest lawyer at the time. This guy was his campaign chairman. Over 20 felony convictions. This guy right here was taking money from Turkey. This guy, he was, by the way, that led the chant, lock her up, lock her up. He started that. Rick Gates, he was an assistant to this guy. Oh boy, he was actually sentenced too. This guy was sentenced too, though a minor player. But this guy here was actually giving internal campaign data to a foreign national that they could use to target social media on the states that matter, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. That happened. And a lot of people are saying, oh, no, it didn't. This guy right here is the guy that kind of helped coordinate with Julian Assange, that dump of those email messages. He actually was a former Nixon guy. He has a tattoo of Nixon on his back. His name's Roger Stone. Interesting guy. It didn't matter. Whatever happened, happened. Trump wins 304 electoral votes, Hillary Clinton 227. He thumped her in the electoral college and took 3 blue states away from Democrats that had not lost this since the Civil War, pretty much. Called the big blue wall evaporated. Now, here's the other part of it, though. Trump lost by almost 3 million votes in the popular vote. Now, here's what happens. When you lose in the popular vote and throughout American history, you don't get a mandate. An indecisive election like this does not mean success. The support of the majority of the people to lead the country, if it's not there, you don't have a mandate. The day after Trump's inaugural speech, the biggest women's march in the history of the United States took place in opposition to his winning. John Quincy Adams won in the Electoral College, but not the popular vote, lasted one term. Hayes wins in the Electoral College, not in the popular vote, one term. Harrison wins in the Electoral College, one term. Did not get the popular vote. Bush did not get the popular vote first time around. Managed to hang on barely, but his poll numbers after that dropped to the lowest of any president in American history. But he did manage to win re-election. Trump, not so lucky. So here we are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times that somebody has lost the popular vote, won in the Electoral College, but it usually doesn't go well. It starts you off with one strike. Now, Trump went through kind of the first 3 years, sailed through pretty easily with the economy growing, and then what hit him and destroyed his presidency? COVID. But there's something else that triggered his opposition candidate. Early in the Trump presidency, there was, Virginia. You guys, I love the fact that we did the Virginia election. It was a really good one for us to kind of focus on. I think you're going to want to focus on this one. I think you're going to watch this one. So those of you who are kind of trying to do two things at one time, you'll want to see this one. In Charlottesville, Virginia, the home of the University of Virginia, established by Thomas Jefferson himself. This city is a very southern city, right? And after the Civil War, Confederates, kind of upset that they lost that war, started to build monuments to Confederate war heroes. Okay, now here's the thing. The most prominent general was Robert E. Lee. Big statue right there in the middle of town to Robert E. Lee. Okay. Do you know he is responsible for killing more Union soldiers than any other general? And was a slave owner and whatever. So he was fighting to defend slavery, right? But here's the thing, right? Robert E. Lee. Do you know Virginia actually had Confederate History Month? They didn't have Civil War History Month or Union History Month, even though more Union soldiers would die in Virginia than Confederates did. 12,000 at Fredericksburg alone, 10,000 at Charlottesville, 5,000 in one day at Cold Harbor. And yet they're celebrating the Confederacy. But Virginia has changed. It went from red, conservative, to what? And people started to object to these symbols of the Confederacy. All over the South, they've gotten rid of the old Confederate flag on those state flags. All over the South, only one state still has it on there. And the city here, University of Virginia, people objected to that symbol in the middle of town. Let's move the statue to a more historic site, maybe a museum or maybe a cemetery or something. When they announced they were going to take that down, Nazis, fascists, KKK members, a whole group of white supremacists came into the city. Now, it wasn't a huge group. They applied for a permit to protest. Can you do that? Can you protest this? Taking down of this symbol? Sure. Police organized it. As soon as the students found out about it, they organized a group called Antifa, which means anti-fascist. And so suddenly now we had two rallies, one in favor of keeping the statue, one saying, we don't want fascists in our university town. And it turned violent. And one of the white supremacist kids gets in a truck and runs right through the Antifa protesters and kills Heather Heyer, and a student dies, or an individual dies. President Trump, in response, said, well, but there were good people on both sides. Biden goes ballistic. He comes out of retirement as vice president, writes a big article, and then decides, I've got to run for president of the United States. And here is his campaign announcement.
Charlottesville, Virginia is home to the author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. It was there in August of 2017 we saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open.
the chant was, Jews will not replace us, blood and soil. Those are classic Nazi slogans from 1930 Germany. The torch parades are infamous in German history.
Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, championing the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans who violent clash ensued. And a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? With those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen. The core values of this nation, our standing in the world, our very democracy, everything that has made America America is at stake. That's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. Folks, America is an idea that's stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It gives hope to the most desperate people on earth. It guarantees that everyone is treated with dignity and gives hate no safe harbor. It instills in every person in this country the belief that no matter where you start in life, there's nothing you can't achieve if you work at it. That's what we believe. And above all else, that's what's at stake in this election. We can't forget what happened in Charlottesville. Even more important, we have to remember who we are. This is America.
Whoa. The most dramatic announcement for president I have ever heard, and I've heard most of them all the way back from the 1960s. It's game on. But when he made this announcement, what were his chances of becoming the nominee for the Democrats? 0. Who was the odds-on favorite to win the nomination for the Democrats in this election? Who had the inside track? Bernie Sanders. He had the organization. He built it up over 4 years. He narrowly lost out to Hillary Clinton 4 years earlier. And it looked like we were going to have a Trump-Sanders face-off in the fall. The remarkable campaign of Joe Biden is as interesting a story as the one I told you about the unlikely rise of Trump. Now, don't blame Trump for all of this that's going on. What the Trump presidency did was expose to all of us the divisions in our country. My question for you is simple. How are we going to fix it? And I gave you the answer in previous lectures. If you want to fix this country, where have you got to start? In the primaries. What was it? There's a crawler running across? Yeah. The primaries. That's where you got to show up and vote. You got to show up. It's so easy to get involved. Right? Just walk in to the meeting. That's it. That's all you got to do. If you want to go Republican, you just sign a little form, become a Republican for a day. That's so they can send you emails and stuff later. You want to change party the next day, you can. But it's only in the primaries where you're going to make a difference. Because in the general election, it's usually decided, and 5 states will make the decision, and Utah's not one of them. What are the 5 states that will be the most important in the next election? Georgia, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And by the way, I've had students actually, college students that I know of, actually traveled on the campaigns and gone to those states to campaign. Okay, sorry, I didn't Please come and ask me your question while I end this really quick.